Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer Sondersendung des Filmmakers Cast. Mein Name ist Konstantin und ich melde mich heute vom Cinestrange Filmfestival in Braunschweig. Zu Gast ist dieses Mal Filmregisseur John Landis, bekannt aus den 80er-Jahre-Klassikern Blues Brothers, American Werewolf, Der Prinz aus Zamunda, Die Glücksritter, das Michael Jackson-Video Thriller und vieles andere mehr. Es gibt zu Cinestrange von Filmmakers Cast ein kleines Videocast, unser zweites mittlerweile, mit ein paar Impressionen von dem Festival. Dies hier ist jetzt eine Sondersendung direkt aus dem Werkstattgespräch mit John Landis, wo er fast eine Stunde lang über seine Filme spricht, Fragen beantwortet von den Fans. Die Qualität ist ein bisschen gemindert, man versteht zwar schon, was er sagt, aber leider lief während des Werkstattgespräches das im Foyer des C1 im Braunschweiger Kino stattfand, die Pausenmusik im Foyer. Das heißt, ich kapiere das nicht. Es war gerade nichts los und es lief ganz laut die Musik. Das heißt, ihr hört im Hintergrund immer irgendwelche Chart-Songs. Ab und zu mal auch ein Warnhinweis, dass jemand falsch geparkt hat. Aber das umspielt Landis lässig mit seinem Humor. Ich glaube, 3-mal passiert das, nur zur Info. Das Ganze ist 1,5 Stunden lang. Auf Englisch mit Fragen aus dem Publikum mit einem sehr heavy German Accent, aber das ist eben so. Viel Spaß damit und bis demnächst.
Thanks a lot. Now it's working. I will go to the audience so that everybody of you can have questions and I will hold the mic to you. It's mainly, it's like on a film set, isn't it like on a film set?
I hope not.
What is about your film sets? Can you describe your film sets? Was it not all the action on the set, nothing on the screen? Was different? How were your film sets organized?
Well, every set's different. Depends on your location, or whether you're on a stage or it's filmmaking is very organized in terms of it's very hierarchical, like a factory or a military, like a ship. There's the director, but the set is run by the assistant director. The assistant director is in charge of the set, and he presents it to the director. He says, "We're ready,"
And then you move.
or not.
Or not.
Yeah, but a set is very organized, believe it or not, because everyone has their own job. And the most interesting thing about The most interesting thing about filmmaking, and by filmmaking I mean motion pictures because it includes digital, but it's handcrafted. No one understands when they go see a movie, it is handcrafted because a movie is made of individual shots, individual setups. Each setup requires the skills of electricians, plumbers, seamstresses, carpenters, drivers, I mean all kinds of hairdressers, makeup artists, wardrobe and costume people. It's a very elaborate group of people who have specialized skills, and they all are there to give the director what the director, he or she, wants at that moment in front of the camera. And every time it's different. Every single shot is different, and every single shot requires the skills of many craftspeople, all hopefully being guided by one vision of the director. But what's fascinating is that people don't realize when they see a movie, it is handcrafted in a way that nothing else in the mass market other than theater is handcrafted. You buy cars, you buy Coca-Cola, you buy electronics, none of that shit's handcrafted. But motion pictures are made for mass consumption, and they're handcrafted. It's a remarkable thing. That doesn't mean they're good. It is a remarkable thing.
But then from the director it absorbs a lot of energy, of spiritual and physical energy.
Sometimes. It's there's no rules about it. It's interesting because in fact some directors hardly speak, and some directors are very loud, and some directors are very quiet. There's no right or wrong way.
Were you a monitor, a screen director, or were you going right into the actors, in the acting? What type of
I
dimension?
don't like that. There's a tendency now, especially since digital, they call it video village, where they have monitors over there. A lot of television's done like that. I don't like that personally because I like staying by the camera with the performers, right up there. But I do use a monitor because when I started working in the film industry in the 70s as a director, there were many, many craftsmen in England, in Hollywood, in Rome, in Paris, in Berlin, in all the film centers, people who had been doing it for 30 and 40 years. And so there were people who were camera operators, who were like surgeons. They were so accurate. But what happened, that changed. In the early 80s, it changed because those guys retired or died. And then suddenly you had a lot of young people, thank you. You had a lot of people, watch this. He asked me, this is very much like Laurel and Hardy. Watch. Can I have a pillow? Is there a pillow? Okay, I'll stand. Well, I have no idea what I was saying. What was I talking about? Someone wake John up. What was I talking about? You don't remember. Thank you. What happened was she started to have camera operators, who were younger and less experienced. And so up until about 1982, if I had an operator, I could say to them, I want the camera to do exactly this and stop here and move here and do this. And I knew it would. But starting and trading places with the first time where I had a big crane shot, and it came down and follows Don and Ralph out of the car and goes up, and it's supposed to stop on this brass plate. And I said to the operator, do we have it? He said, yes, sir. I said, great. And then I saw the dailies, and the camera came down and went like this. You're the brass plate. And the camera came down and went. And I thought, fuck that. What? So from then on, I used a monitor. Just to make sure that the operator's giving me what I want. But I can just look at it in my hand, just to make sure that the shots...
My final, if we want to speculate, science fiction, the year 2050. Your vision of filmmaking in the year 2050. Will there be movies, regular movies?
Oh, there'll always be regular movies. But the virtual reality is coming in, and it's... I was given a demonstration a month ago in Los Angeles of a virtual reality thing where it's shooting 360 and you wear this headpiece, and it was with an iPhone. You put the iPhone in and you could turn and look up, look down. You could look anywhere. And they wanted me to make a short film in this, and I thought, well, this kind of sucks, because the whole point of being a director is you're telling the audience where to look. And it's very interesting in theater, on stage, the most important person is who? The actor. Because if you go see a play, no matter how well directed, how well lit, how beautiful the set, how wonderful the costumes, if the actor sucks, or the actor's not doing what he's supposed to do, it's bad. The actor controls what happens. In a film, the director has much more control because he's telling you where to look, or she's telling you where to look. Plus, they're getting the performance, hopefully, they want. And sometimes when a performer can't give you the performance you really want, you have to figure out a way to pretend they are, to trick you. There are many film tricks to improve an actor's performance. And we've all done them. But anyway, it's, how is it going to be? I don't know, but it's going to be the same in terms of storytelling. What I'm sad about.
Think still stories?
Do I think stories? Oh, how long has it been? 300,000 years there have been stories? Yes,
Yeah,
I think
you
stories.
think so? Yeah.
I know so.
Okay.
That's what religion is, stories. Of course it's stories. Humans need stories. That's the least of it. The hard part is how you tell the story.
So I would go to the audience and
Be careful.
Any questions?
oh my God.
No.
You're like from StarCraft.
Okay, one.
Okay, I come over.
I feel like I'm like the butcher or the baker. We're up here like we're a judge.
Yes, Judge.
Judge.
Hello.
Judge, take that man out.
I would have a question about today's filmmaking. Like when you made movies in the 80s or 90s, you had a certain budget, a smaller. It's a car is parked wrong and they have to move the car.
I'm sorry. Duncan. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. When there were movies made in the 80s and 90s, you had a certain budget and you couldn't really go exactly this budget. But nowadays they have 250 million, 200 million, 150 million. What do you think about today's movies basically with those huge budgets what they have compared to the old budgets?
Well, the budget of a movie is how much money they're willing to give you to make the movie. In a lot of these movies they're making, the superhero movies, the Marvel movies and stuff, the money is eaten up by the digital effects. They, you know, if you look at an Iron Man, those are really animated movies. I mean, they shoot live action, but 60% of what you're seeing on screen is CG, and CG, something people do not understand is CG is very expensive because it's very labor intensive. There's more human labor in computer animation than in traditional drawn animation. You know when you watch these movies at the end credits, those names, they keep going, those are all, see, that's because it's animation and it's very expensive. But in terms of what do I think about, it's not the money about making the movie. What has changed dramatically is the marketing of a movie. With the internet has changed everything and is still changing everything. And nobody knows what the fuck is going to happen. Seriously. And with piracy, it's very difficult. That's why very often now big movies open all over the world at the same time. It's because they're trying to protect it against piracy. It's very hard because the biggest pirates are the Chinese military. And it's sort of, you can't go arrest them, you know, it's difficult. So it's a hard thing. And my sadness with this is just evolution and technology. But now most people are perfectly comfortable watching a movie like this or on a laptop. I mean, the way people watch television now is they don't watch it at the same time. It used to be that 9 o'clock Sunday night, you know, we all watch. No. I mean, more people are watching television than ever, but all by themselves. On laptops, whatever. And so it's a strange time, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. But you know, I really believe the best way to see a movie, and you can't replace it, is in a big theater with as many people as possible. Because but there's now many people think, oh, go to the movies. How much does it cost? Tell me, we'll watch it when it comes on TV or something. Yeah, it's expensive. And the problem is, movies are meant to be seen large and with good sound with many people, because the more people are in the audience, the more intense the experience. A funny movie is much funnier geometrically with people. A scary movie is much scarier the more people. A sad movie is sadder. A romantic movie is more romantic. A sexy movie is sexy. I'm very serious. It's like contagious. It's emotional. And laughter and fear is contagious. And it's really sad because more and more people are perfectly happy to see a movie, like that.
Laughter and fear is a very good connection. I've got a question about American Werewolf in London. There's a nightmare with werewolves in Wehrmacht uniforms, and I do not know. You know the speed metal band Slayer?
Do I know what?
The speed metal band Slayer from America. It's a rock band.
Called Slayer.
Slayer.
Yes, Slayer. Heavy metal.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And the artwork of one album has got a werewolf with a Wehrmacht steel helmet. Is it possible they are inspired by your film?
What year was it?
Mid 80s.
Well, that's easy. If it's after 1981.
You never heard?
Well, the SS used to have the Luftwaffe, the werewolves. You know that, right? There was a whole division.
Not the SS. It was in the last days of the war. There were the werewolf activities.
Is this the Flying Shark movie? I'm serious, there was a division. So,
Yeah, but not not of the SS. It's,
not the SS.
no.
I guess the nightmare sequence in American Werewolf is inspired from Louis Boulevard.
Well,
Yes.
not the Nazis, but the idea of, he's right. There's one of my favorite movies is a movie by Louis Boulevard called The Street Charm de Bourgeoisie, which is a great movie. And in it, you're watching the movie, and then characters are introduced, the stories come along, and then someone wakes up. A gentleman wakes up. I think it's Fernando Rey, but a guy wakes up, and you realize everything you've seen was a dream. And then he goes about his business, and you get involved with him. And then a woman wakes up, and you go, wait a minute, because everything we just saw was her dreaming about this guy having a dream. And it happens like 4 times. And they just keep getting. Louis Boulevard was brilliant, and so I thought that's a funny idea. I like the idea of a dream within a dream. So I made it a scare. Now it's a cliche.
Yeah, Dreams in a Dream is in one of your other films, in Susan's Plan. Yes, there's more dreams, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8.
You can count?
Yes.
Yes. I have no idea what that means, but yes.
If it's okay, I'd like to ask a question about the Thriller music video. If I'm informed correctly, this must be one of the first or the first music video ever to incorporate a real story that extends longer than the span of the song itself.
I don't know.
Can you tell us how the idea came about?
Oh my God, it's so boring. I made a movie called American Werewolf in London, and Michael Jackson liked that movie. He didn't like scary movies, but he for some reason, I think his brothers used to torture him, but he liked American Werewolf very much, and he was particularly taken with the metamorphosis, the makeup work of Rick Baker. And so Michael contacted me, and basically he wanted to turn into a monster. That was his whole thing. He wanted to transform into a monster on the screen. So I met with him and we talked. It's a long story, but it just basically, he wanted me to do a video for Thriller, which he turned into a monster. So I listened to the song, and I thought, I don't want to do a rock video because, they're commercials for records. And what happened was, I thought, wait a minute, Michael is such a huge celebrity. He was a massive star. I said, Mike, can I make a theatrical short? Because it used to be, you're too young, but it used to be when you went to the movies, you saw a movie and a newsreel, and you saw a cartoon, and you saw a short, and I wanted to bring back the short. I think short is a wonderful, like a Bugs Bunny cartoon or Laurel and Hardy, or it can be dramatic. I just love that 14-minute, 15-minute thing. And so he said, sure. And so we raised the money. The record company hated the idea. They said, you know, Walter Yetnikoff basically told us to go fuck ourselves, you know. And very quickly, Thriller, the album, produced by the brilliant Quincy Jones, the album had already been #1 for over a year when Michael called me. I mean, I think it was like 14 months at #1, and now it's #4 or something. And it was already the best-selling album of all time. And they had made Billie Jean and Beat It, 2 videos. Bob Giraldi did Beat It. And I forgot who did Billie Jean, I'm sorry. But they were very influential and important videos. And so the record company thought, okay, next. We made all this money, next. We're not going to spend any more money, you know, next. And Michael said, well, I'll pay for it. And I said, no, I'm not letting you pay for it. So my partner, George Folsey, had the idea. He said, cable TV was brand new then. And there was HBO and Showtime. And Showtime only had about 100,000 subscribers. It was very small. And they said, we'll give you $250,000 if you let us air it first. But you can't air 15 minutes. So the hour was Thriller, and then the making of Thriller, which we started to call the making of filler, because like, Jesus Christ, 45 minutes. And it turned out very well, but MTV then called, furious, saying, how can it be on Showtime? We're MTV. Because MTV never paid for anything. They got all those videos for free from record companies, you know. And we said, well, if you want it, you got to pay us. So they put up $250,000. So we had the $500,000 it cost to make it. And then I made it, and then we didn't expect that kind of success. It was huge. And the record went back to #1. You got to remember, it was already the best-selling record of all time, and it tripled its sales. So it did many things, Thriller. I mean, it had big influence, but because Michael wanted to turn into a monster.
You talked about cinematic experience, about shorts, about Bugs Bunny. How did you grow up in movies, your personal introduction to movies?
Well, I was born in 1950, so I grew up like the directors they call the movie brats. Francis Coppola, George Lucas, Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, Steven Spielberg, Peter McDonough, all those guys. They were all born in the 40s, late 40s, and I'm like, they're all older than me, but still. We grew up with television. And television in the 50s and even in the 60s, there were all these local channels and all these channels, and they didn't have all this product, so they used to show old movies. And in the United States, there were the RKO stations, which were in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, Pittsburgh, all the big cities, like 32 cities. And they had this programming called $1 Million Movie. And the way they programmed it was they would show the same movie 5 nights, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 8 p.m., and then twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. So they would show Mighty Joe Young, and we would memorize it. Or Rodin, you know, or Godzilla.
Japanese.
Or the Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman. And, they showed a lot of cassettes.
Abbott and Costello made
They showed everything. All kinds of movies. And so we would see. It's very interesting, because now when everything's available, people see fewer films. And what's very shocking to me, I was asked to teach many times, and I didn't want to, but my wife beat me up, and I went and I taught a semester, a class at USC. And I was shocked at the film literacy of the students. These are graduate students. They haven't seen shit. They thought movies started with Star Wars. I mean, they hadn't seen anything. I showed them Buster Keaton, they were like, but it was so remarkable to me that people really, the film students, I was amazed. I was just amazed. Now they teach film theory. You forgive me, but it's pretty much masturbation, you know. And it's funny because critically, my movies, I always got terrible reviews. I mean, I always got, in the United States, it was badly reviewed. But as I grew older, it was like turning 60, and suddenly I was legendary. When I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, I was a schmuck. But I turned 60, I was iconic. And the movies that the same critics shit on now were referred to as role models and great films. And I thought, what? If I'd known this, I would have been 60 earlier. But that guy.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
How did you approach the final chase scene in Blues Brothers? I mean, didn't you were afraid? It's like Apocalypse Now. It's like a own operetta of car crashes and stuff. Didn't you were afraid to shoot something like that? It's like it's insane.
I hope it's insane, but no, that was very much like a military operation. All the stunts were planned out. I had brilliant stunt drivers, Gary McClarty, a great stunt man, and my main driver was a guy named Bud Eakins. Have you ever heard of Bud Eakins? He was a brilliant driver. In The Great Escape, he's the one who doubled Steve McQueen on the bike, you know, and...
over the fence.
Yeah, and also in Bullet, the big chase? He's the driver of the other car. And in fact, Peter Yates said, you're not going to double anybody. You play the bad guy, because that's Bud. And we did amazing things in the Blues Brothers. It was very complicated. And we had a lot of cooperation from the police, but it was silly. I mean, we did stuff that was insane. We had downtown Chicago, we had 36 cars going 110 miles an hour, some shots, which meant we had to have 400 PAs and about 70 cops, because you had to block every entrance, every possible entrance to that one piece of street, and it was complicated. A lot of walkie-talkies.
And a little more specific question about Soul Glow in Coming to America.
Yeah.
Who came up with that idea? I listen to it every day in my car.
Well, Barry Blaustein and David Chetfield, who wrote the script, Soul Glow was their idea, but the song, I wrote the lyrics, but the song was Nile Rodgers. Nile Rodgers do you know who he is? Okay, he's brilliant. What people don't know about Nile, because he looks, with the dreadlocks and she hates Nile.
Möchte bitte sein Fahrzeug entfernen, wie der Fahrer des Kennzeichen BS-EL-110.
Achso, immer noch.
Nee, TNX.
You understood what they said.
Understood what they said?
Yeah, absolutely. Connor understood. He's Scottish.
So you understand German? You understand German?
Da, yeah.
You understand German?
Yeah.
Then the next question was here.
We were at Nile Rodgers.
Thank you. Nile Rodgers is brilliant. And everyone knows Chic and, Freak Out, and they also know that he's a brilliant producer. He produced David Bowie and Madonna. But what you don't know is he's a classically trained musician from Juilliard. He's one of the great players, but the guy really knows his stuff. And he wrote the score for Coming to America while we were shooting. That's the fastest movie ever made. And it's a great score. I'm not talking about the songs, because most of the songs are very 80s, when it was made. But the score is great. And so I gave these lyrics to Niall, and I said, make this ridiculous. And he brought in a singer who could hit these things, and he said, record it, and we listened to it, soul glow. And then Niall said, I'll never forget, he said, no, hurt your throat. And the guy sang it that, act like that. It was like, I think it's very fun. But Nile Rodgers.
You participated in a documentary called American Grindhouse about the American exploitation cinema. Is this something which has influenced you, or which you personally like? Some of your favorite movies of all time?
Everything influences me,
Okay.
and I enjoy some Grindhouse. I can't think of any that are my favorites, but I what was interesting about Grindhouse, this is an interesting phenomenon that's happened with the internet, which is images were forbidden. You weren't allowed to see certain things. It was unacceptable. And that's because of government censorship, but also because of morals and because of standards and practices and just people's, think of what is to show. So Grindhouse was always spectacle. You'd go see, on 42nd Street or Hollywood Boulevard in lousy theaters, you'd see triple features and they'd show Italian zombie movies and they'd show, there was a German, what's it called, Mark of the Devil, the German title.
Excellent.
Yeah, and the way they sold it in the States was the most disgusting movie ever made. And when you went to the theater, you were given a vomit bag, a paper bag that you could throw up in. And so when you saw the movie, it was very violent, especially for the time. You'd pull out I remember the tongue, like, geez. But that's not nearly as violent. Not nearly as violent. More effective, better movie, but not nearly as violent. And one of the interesting, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Toby's the first one, I think is a brilliant film, but there's very little, if any, violence on screen. It's just so intense and terrifying. But what's happened, these kind of things, whether they were exploitation, meant things you couldn't see on TV or in most movies. So it meant nudity or fucking or simulated fucking. It meant violence and blood and guts, or it meant monsters that were particularly scary. Something you could exploit in the advertising. And some of them were just shameless, and some of them were terrible, and some were actually very, very good. I saw Night of the Living Dead. I'll never forget it. I saw it in a triple feature, and I thought, how did this happen? This movie's brilliant. Like, what? But all the martial arts movie, the Chopsaki movies, and we just saw everything was thrown in. But what's happened, and I think it's a combination of cable TV and the internet. I'm very glad my children are grown, because now everything's available to everyone. You can watch real people being killed. You can watch torture. You can see the worst kind of pornography, healthy pornography, unhealthy pornography. You can see anything on the internet, and you cannot protect your children. You can't prevent people from seeing it. It's impossible. You can block it at your house, but they'll see it at a friend's computer. It's incredible what you can get on this. And it's just a strange time. And it's what happened, I think it's evolved. What's happened with gore is very weird, which it became comedic. With Evil Dead, and Evil Dead 2, which is truly funny, or Peter Jackson's movie Brain Dead, which is so gory it becomes like Dada. It's a strange thing. And also what's very strange to me is all this stuff is now completely mainstream. It's corporate, it's mainstream. Game of Thrones, which is a great show, that's a big hit all over the world. There is violence in Game of Thrones that if you put it in a movie, you'd be given an R or X rating. But for free on TV. The first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, first 3 seasons, had like 22 anal rapes. I'm serious. I love the idea that somebody counted that. But it's very strange. It's a very strange thing that you can see. You know, on cable TV now, there are all these movies, you know, that where Roger Corman, New World, used to make the student nurses or those Filipino, you know, women in cages, just nudity and women. Now every cable show you is sort of like, for no reason. One of my favorite tropes, and Joel Silver was a producer, a big producer in the 80s. And one of my favorite things, a lot of Walter Hill movies, and a lot of movies in the 80s, was there'd be like a cop movie or whatever the movie was, they would have a scene in a strip club. For no reason. And they'd be sitting there talking just so you'd see the girl. You know, it was just to get the tits in the movie. It was like I had the idea of someone going, okay, car crash done. How many tits in the movie? Okay. And now all that stuff is on TV. And it's mainstream. Very much like comic books and science fiction. That used to be, when I was into comics or horror films or things like, it was outre. We were weirdos. And then George and Steve, you really have to go with Star Wars and then Jaws. Jaws is a remake of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And Star Wars is a remake of Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. And what's fascinating is those were always B pictures, low budget. And now, they're A budget. It's weird. And now they're big business. It's very weird. It's like, it was like I said to George and Steve, like Revenge of the Nerds.
Let's go back to the good old days of the Blues Brothers. This used to be a tribute to all the great musicians of the 50s and 60s, but somehow over the years, the Blues Brothers became so iconic that they overshadow their influences. Can you recommend?
I don't think that's true.
No? Okay.
No, I disagree.
So, would you recommend some records from the 60s and 50s for us?
Well, it's not about the 50s and 60s so much as rhythm and blues, but yeah, sure, I'd recommend any Stax record. And, or a lot of what people don't realize is rock and roll and rockabilly and country western and gospel, they all kind of come together. So I'd recommend any Sun records. There's a lot of early Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard, Wilson Pickett, or the best guy. I mean, I'm very lucky. I've worked with some of the great acts of all time. I mean, everybody from Aretha, David Bowie, Paul McCartney, and Michael Jackson, John Lee Hooker, Wilson Pickett. I mean, I've worked with so many great artists. But I'll never forget when I was 22 years old, 1972. My friend Jim O'Rourke and I went to Las Vegas. We drove to Las Vegas. And I'd never been there. And it's a very bizarre place. And the Hilton International Hotel, Elvis was playing the thing, and to us, Elvis was a joke. Because he wasn't fat yet, he was lean. But he wore those white jumpsuits with the long fringe and cut the hair, and he had that dyed black hair. And I think it was because of all the terrible movies he made. He just made all those terrible movies. I just thought Elvis is like a joke. We're in the Beatles and Bob Dylan and Simon Garfunkel and Aretha Franklin and, all those people. And all this Motown and stuff. So I'm thinking, Elvis. And Jim said, let's go see Elvis. And I went, okay, why not? So we went and saw Elvis. He was fucking great. He was one of the best performances I've ever seen. And I'll never forget it because I went thinking he was a joke. And I know why he's Elvis Presley. I know why we're talking about him. How long has he been dead? He was great. And one of the most interesting things to me is the really great performers. They really are great. You ever see James Brown live? Or Otis Redding? Oh my God, they're great. I'll tell you something, you know what? Last year, in the United States, they have a thing called the Kennedy Center Honors. Yes, please, with ice. Michael Slim-Truck. Something terrible's going to happen. And it was last year at the Kennedy Center Honors, which is like there's someone who hates me who keeps putting their car. You're welcome. What? Outer space. You could make that movie. Anyway, I was just telling you to go on YouTube. Okay, so the Kennedy Center Honors are a thing every year where it's honoring great artists for their contributions, and people like Bob Dylan and opera singers and great pianists, great composers. Paul Simon's gotten it. Thank you. George Lucas has gotten it. Spielberg has gotten it. But usually it's poets and musicians and stuff. And last year, one of the honorees was Carole King. And so people perform and stuff. So there's President Obama and Mrs. Obama. And I think George Lucas and Carole King, and I forgot who else were up there. I think Maya Angelou maybe. Anyway, they're sitting there, very distinguished. And out comes Aretha Franklin. She's wearing a huge fur coat and carrying her purse. The audience goes crazy. And she comes out and sits down and starts playing the piano. And she does You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, song written by Carole King. Watch it on YouTube. Just go home and open it and watch it. Because you go, oh, that's why she's Aretha Franklin. You know? She's fucking brilliant. Oh, someone, you already asked him. But Rudolph likes you.
Can you tell us something about your relationship with Dan Aykroyd over the years?
We're lovers.
I guess so.
Danny Aykroyd is someone I really do love. Danny Aykroyd. He's a wonderful, totally insane person. I don't think he gets credit for what a really good actor he could be. Has an original brain. Think about it. Ghostbusters, Blues Brothers, those are Dan Aykroyd ideas, you know, and he always comes up with he's a motorhead, he's a biker. If he had, many years ago, Rosie Schuster was his girlfriend, and she said Danny Aykroyd's epiphany would be to commit a crime and arrest himself. He grew up in Canada, he's Catholic. He actually was in a seminary. He was going to be a priest for a while there. And while he was in seminary, they were doing second-story jobs. You know what that is? It's burglaries. And I thought, perfect. Danny is passionate about rhythm and blues and very knowledgeable. And he's a great harp player. That's him playing the harmonica. But he's a unique person. He's in the liquor business now. He makes vodka. Called Crystal Skull vodka. Yeah, he's got some bullshit thing about it's cleaned over time. I don't know. But I really think he's great. And when people don't appreciate Danny, and I think he's ill-used, because if you look at him, look at Danny in Trading Places, and then look at Danny as Elwood. They're like from different planets, you know. The guy can do anything, and anyway, I think he's wonderful, and he's a friend.
Well, since you mentioned Trading Places, would you agree that it's the greatest film about behaviorism ever made?
About what?
Behavior psychology.
Would I agree?
Yeah.
No.
Mr. Landis, can you tell us, can you remember the first time you met director Joe Dante? Approximately. Joe Dante, he was our guest.
I'm not sure.
3 years ago, and of course he told us a lot about famous monsters, Filmland, the magazines, all this stuff.
Joe grew up in New Jersey?
Yes.
Yeah, New Jersey. I grew up in Los Angeles. Okay. That's 3,000 miles apart. But there's an international community of famous monsters kids, you know, because while I was looking at Los Angeles at famous monsters, Peter Jackson was in Auckland, New Zealand looking at famous monsters. Guillermo del Toro was in Guadalajara, Mexico looking at, and Steve Spielberg was in, where was he? He was in Phoenix, Arizona. And George Lucas was in Northern California. I mean, that magazine was written for adolescent boys. But it was interesting because it was almost like a secret society of these monster kids who were fascinated by monsters. And what was unusual about Famous Monsters was it wasn't about actors. It wasn't about movie stars. Of course, it talked about Boris Karloff and Lugosi and talked about wonderful actors. But it also talked about writers. You know, Ray Bradbury and Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft. And it talked a lot about writers and even more so directors. And even more so makeup artists. And people like Ray Harryhausen. And for us, you know, that now, you know, now we're I'm sick of making of. You know, I created the genre and I'm sick of it. You know, I don't want to know how they did that. I want to be amazed by it. In fact, sometimes it helps me if you know how they made something because you go, wow, that's great. It's like when you see a painting that blows you away, you know. But sometimes it's good not to know. But as a kid, you know, seeing Willis O'Brien was about animation, you know. The magazine was ridiculous, but for, you know, 9, 10, 11-year-old boys, it was the paradise. My mother threw all of them away.
Yes, I.
Yeah, because there was some William Castle movie, and it was a picture of a woman with a blonde hair like this. She had a hatchet in her head. It was all black and white. She went, "What is that?" Threw them all away.
Is it very like the Joe Dante movie Matinee, where the boy all has his magazine?
Yes, well, Joe totally worships. He's always referencing Famous Monsters. But I met Joe in the 70s in Los Angeles when he was working for Corman.
I'd like to ask you how Burke and Hare came across your way. To my knowledge, that film was also filmed at Ealing, whether you have a connection to Ealing cinema, all those great comedies in the 40s and 50s.
Well, I love the great Ealing pictures. I mean, I think Kind Hearts and Coronets is almost... Well, actually, is it Kind Hearts and Coronets? Yeah. And there's another one I like even more. The Lady Killers. And it's another one that I'm going to go crazy. But there's...
Galore.
What?
Whiskey Galore.
That's one also, but no, I'll think of it. Oh, Dead of Night. Dead of Night's an Ealing picture, which is one of the best anthology films ever made. I strongly suggest you see it. It's great. But I have a friend named Gorinda Chadha, who's a director, a British director. What do they? The English call them Asian. We call them Indian. But she's British. She grew up in London, and she made thank you, Bend It Like Beckham. She's a great director. And, she's a friend, and she had an office at Ealing Studios. And I said, really, I'd love to see Ealing Studios. So I went out there to visit her once, and she introduced me to this guy, Barnaby Thompson. And he said, what are you doing now? And I said, not much, why? You know, and he said, I have a script I'd like to give you. I said, okay. I didn't know it was like 10 years old, but he gave me the script of Burke and Hare. And what I liked about it, because it's deeply perverse, is the fact that, you know, Burke and Hare are despicable, the murderers, and they're loathsome. But the way the script treated them, they were like kind of the heroes in a very dark way. But so I had the idea, this is like the evil Laurel and Hardy. It would be like, let's make a romantic comedy about Charles Manson. So that's how I made the movie. It's very British. It's all English.
So he took my question.
You bastard!
I love Burke and Hare too. And so my second question is working with Simon Pegg as funny as we all think?
He's wonderful. He's a genuinely wonderful person. And he's a real fanboy. I mean, that guy, he's serious. I mean, for him to be in Star Wars, it's like he can die now. You know? All he wanted, he kept saying to me, would you introduce me to Carrie Fisher? I said, sure. And I introduced him to Carrie Fisher, and he was like, but he's wonderful. I think he's very talented.
So you already talked a little bit about music and rhythm and blues, but more in general, there's such a strong presence of Black American culture in your work, starting with Thriller, but most certainly with Trading Places. So yeah, why so? Much more than in other white directors' work.
I don't know if that's true, but what is true, I appreciate Black American culture, African American culture. What is very true is I'm very proud of something. You know, everybody makes movies for different reasons. For money, I've done that. For political reasons, I've done that. You know, for emotional reasons, as favors. I mean, there are lots of reasons to make movies. And sometimes just for the opportunity to shoot. Why is that fun? Anyway, with Coming to America, when Eddie came to me and pitched that to me, he didn't have a story. What he had was African prince comes to Queens in New York to find the queen. And there really wasn't much of a story, but I went back to Deborah, my wife, the very brilliant costume designer, and Professor Doctor, another one. There are a lot of them. When is she speaking? Where? Not here. How is she going to show her stuff? Good. Okay. Deborah's professor, she has a chair at UCLA. And she teaches costume history, costume design, and film. She's written many books. If you're interested in filmmaking, she's really good at this. And she will change your brain and your appreciation of film and what's involved, especially in clothing. And it's very different than what you think it is. She's a brilliant teacher, so she's speaking here tomorrow at noon. No, at 1? At 1. You're really lucky if you see her. She teaches all over the world. She teaches at AFI, at UCLA, at USC, and then NYU teaches everywhere. In any case, I told her about the idea of coming to Eddie said, you know, what do you think? And she said, John. She got very excited. And she said, it's Cinderella. And I went, yeah. She goes, but it's not Bavaria. It's not Ludwig's castle. It's not, you know, traditional fairy tale where it's Middle European. It's Africa. So instead of fantasy Europe, it's fantasy Africa. And what she meant was, boy, do I have an opportunity to make great clothes. You know? But it was interesting because I immediately thought, it's Africa. And I hadn't thought about it, and I went, well, wait a minute, Eddie's black, so Eddie would come and it would be, and I realized it would essentially be an all-black film. I think in the movie there's like 6 white people at lines. It is mostly African-American, or Zamundan, you know. And what I realized was, up to that point, I never talk. When you do things for certain reasons, you never talk about it until 20 years later. But this was successful, so I could talk about it, which is, I realized, you know, every Hollywood movie and European movie that starred someone who was black, their color was a plot point. Even Trading Places, Eddie played the black guy. Sidney Poitier always played the black guy. And I thought, Jesus Christ, this is a movie. And I realized I'm going to make it like Lubitsch used to make these films with Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy and stuff, and these really light Middle European fantasies. And I thought, shit, I'm going to make this like a Hollywood, glossy looking, you know, big budget. You know, it's even got musical number. I threw everything in there, and I said, and it's going to be a black movie, and no one will notice. Because the story has nothing to do with the color of their skin. Nothing. We make jokes in it about African American culture. There are jokes about, but the movie has nothing to do with their color. They could be Japanese, they could be white, they could be Catholic, they could be Jewish, they could be Muslim. Makes no difference what the fuck they are. It's a classic little romantic comedy. And I thought, that's very exciting. And so I'm making this movie, and the whole time I'm thinking, shit, are they going to realize this is, are they going to notice what I'm doing? But Eddie was such a big star at that point that I don't think that, Beverly Hills Cop, he's the black guy who comes in. It's like, I thought Richard Pryor played the black guy, and I thought, this has nothing to do with their color. And I'm going to, and they made films like black exploitation films for there's a wonderful euphemism, urban. They mean black. And I said, I hope nobody notices. And the good news is, the picture was a huge international success. Nobody noticed. No one has ever said anything about it. So I'm very proud of that. I have no idea what you asked me, but that was the answer.
Sometimes you are acting yourself into the night to get a terrorist. Now, I mean, common shopping all over the world. Can you comment about this? Why did you put the role of a terrorist?
I can easily tell you what happened. Into the Night is a movie that's based on a real story, believe it or not, because it seems like a stupid fantasy, but actually happened. When the Shah fell in Iran, lots of Persians, you can always tell who fled because they called themselves Persians, not Iranians. Anyway, a lot came to Los Angeles. And in fact, LA is called Tehrangeles because we have so many Iranians there. And there's an Iranian TV station, and there's Persian neighborhoods, and it's interesting because so many of the fleds were Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and they're very tight together in the diaspora. It's very interesting. The United States, the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish Persians are all. Anyway, so it's made that the Shah's sister, whose name was Shaheen, who's kind of played in the movie by the great Irene Pappas, who's a wonderful, great, she's a great actress. Anyway, I wanted to do something odd, which was that we have these 4 bad guys who were former Savak. The Savak was real, it's still real, but different. Now they were called religious police. Then, in fact, the character David Bowie plays in the movie refers to them as the Iranian Gestapo. But that's who they were. They were killers, and they were ruthless, and they were terrible, bad assassins for the Shah. They were the Shah's secret police. And in the movie, what happened in real life is that the Shaheen left. There's something called the Peacock Throne, which are basically the Persian crown jewels. She left with like 1/3 of them. Now they're all in Gstaad someplace in a vault, all that Russian, Chinese money. But they came to LA, and there were emeralds smuggled in by a prostitute. The movie's just not a prostitute, but it's a long story, Russian hooker, anyway. And this script, Ron Koslow wrote a screenplay based on this true thing with this guy. He was really kidnapped. It's not. We changed the story a bit, but it's based on a true story. So that meant I needed a lot of Iranian actors, because in the movie there's a great deal of Farsi spoken. And so, Iran has always had great films come out of there. They used to have a very healthy film business. They still have great movies coming out of there. They can't be shown there, but they have great filmmakers in Persia. And many big stars and actors fled the Ayatollah. So I had these wonderful actors who were, it's funny because they were all, what was that movie? won an Academy Award. Ben Affleck directed.
Argo.
Yeah, the whole cast of Argo are my Persians. And I went, hey, look, you know. Anyway, but it's all these guys who came to LA. So in the movie, there's about, 45 Iranian actors, and I cast these 4 guys. And what I wanted the Savak to do, it's this movie with Michelle Pfeiffer and Jeff Goldblum. What I wanted them to do was be deadly killers, but also slapstick. So I like slapstick. So I wanted them to be deadly funny. I don't know how to explain it, but so I had these wonderful actors, and I would tell them what to do, but they couldn't do the physical comedy. And I rehearsed them and stuff, but they really couldn't. They didn't understand. So I fired one, and I said, I'm Russian Jew. You know what it means? It means I can play Arabs, I can play Italians, I can play, Greeks. It's a Mediterranean thing. So do you know my favorite Hollywood actor? Only because of what he played. Anthony Quinn, born in Mexico City. His mother's Mexican, his father's Irish. And he played what? Indians, Eskimos, Greeks, Italians. He played Germans, he played French people. He played everything. Because he was Mexican, Italian, Irish, made no sense. Anyway, so I said, at the last moment, I said, look, I'll just do it. And I got this really silly haircut. And also, I had black hair, but it was a lot younger. And if you'll notice it, if you ever see the movie, my character has a scar that goes from here to here. Because everyone speaks Farsi. I don't speak Farsi, so that's why, that was my reasoning. But it's, so I have a big part in that movie. But in fact, that and Schlock are the only ones that I have, real parts. So.
There's a funny scene inside with Don Siegel at the restroom.
Yes. There are a lot, that there are directors in all of my movies. It's always good. Anything else?
Yeah. Yes, it matters.
Roland, you can't ask anything. See that guy, Roland? Raise your hand. See that guy, Roland? How many fucking things have you asked me to sign?
9.
9?
Okay.
900.
9.
Thanks.
About the microphone, he has a question.
I have a question about the Kentucky Fried movie. Whoever came up with the idea about this family who just go on with their lives with their dead son.
I don't know.
They just pretend they're kids.
No, but
not dead. They're just having dinner and they put them on the couch, the kid corpse, and I think it's just brilliant.
They're very sick.
Thank you.
No, there was that United Appeal for the Dead. It was a charity.
Okay.
I don't know. That the screenplay for Kentucky Fried, about a third of the skits came directly from the Kentucky Fried Theater show. The Kentucky Fried Theater is Jerry Zucker, David Zucker, Jim Abrams, Stephen Stucker, and Pat Proft. And they were very funny, and they had a skit show. And then the rest of the movie, we all wrote, everybody. I don't know who came up with that.
Brilliant movie, anyway.
Brilliant movie?
Yeah, thank you.
900 autographs.
I guess you weren't listening, huh?
He gave me the microphone. It's not my fault.
One question.
Okay. I would just like to know how was your collaboration with Henry Gibson? I mean, did you have any contacts behind the scenes, like a big friendship or something?
We were good friends.
Okay.
He was a wonderfully smart, wonderful actor. Did you ever see Robert Altman's film Nashville?
Yeah.
Henry is great in that movie. And he was a lovely guy. Real radical lefty. Very political. He was a wonderful person.
Thank you.
I heard that in Hollywood now they have scanned up to 1,500 to 2,000 actors and singers, digitized them. For what purpose?
Where did you hear this?
I know this. There is a company, Gentle Giant, and they do it. Karl Mayer, he does it. He says every actor in Hollywood is being scanned and digitized with German medical.
Who made the Flying Shark movie?
Oh, really? Smart.
Because this is your next movie.
One of your first experiences in film business was as a director assistant on Kelly's Heroes in Yugoslavia, Novi Sad. How did this happen?
I was a gopher, not a gopher. They're called production assistants now, but you go for coffee, you go around. The first movie I worked on, I was a mailboy at 20th Century Fox, and the first movie I worked on was called Catch-22. It was a Mike Nichols picture, huge movie Paramount made in Guaymas, San Carlos in Baja California. It's very beautiful there. And I hated the job. My mentor was a wonderful Hungarian-American named Andrew Martin. Bundy Martin started making films at UFA. He made a lot of films at UFA.
Babelsberg,
the silent days. He tells a very funny story. It's not funny, but a true story, which is he had made a film. How do you say in German? Storm over Tibet.
Sturm über Tibet.
That was the movie. Silent film that they shot some of it in Tibet, and they had made this film, and they were in the cutting room cutting, and his editor was a communist. And this is, in a scary time. And one day, the editor comes in a brown shirt. This is absolutely true. And Bundy said, "What the fuck is this?" And he said, "Don't worry, Bundy, I had to do it because of the studio and the unions. I had to do it to keep my job. But I don't, he said, I'm a roast beef Nazi." And Bundy said, what's a roast beef Nazi? And he said, "I'm brown on the outside, but red on the inside." And Bundy picked up the phone and called his wife Yarmila and said, "Pack our bags." And he went home, got in a car, they drove over, they closed the borders like 3 days later. Went to Paris, went to Hollywood, never looked back. Anyway, very scary times. But he ended up as a director at Hollywood, and he was called Andrew Martin. He made movies like King Solomon's Mines with Stuart Granger. He became very famous as a second unit director, meaning an action director. And he directed the chariot race in Ben-Hur. He directed the sea battles in Cleopatra. He directed, there were 3 directors on you ever see The Longest Day? It's actually a good movie. 3 directors, a German, a Brit, and an American. Bundy was the American. He was the American with the very thick Hungarian accent. Bundy used to say that the first line of every Hungarian recipe, steal a chicken. But Bundy offered me a job on the second unit of Catch-22. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's about B-25 aircraft. And Paramount had, at that time, it's not a joke, like the 6th largest air force in the world, because they had all these planes. They had something like 19 B-25s. And they were held together with rubber bands and masking tape. I mean, and we did all the flying, and I spent 3 weeks there, and I hated it. Even though it was very beautiful, and I was working on a film, my job was in the belly of a B-25. How they fought a war, I don't know. They flew like this. Your teeth would hurt when you came down. And my job, Bandera es roja. Bandero es verde, we're flying around. If you see that movie, all that flying's real. It's spectacular. But down there, on the ground, was Mike Nichols, and David Watkins and Orson Welles and Alan Arkin and all these, Art Garfunkel and Bob Newhart Marty Balsam, all these great actors, John Voight, they were like down there. So I quit. I went back to the mailroom because I saw more filmmaking there. When I was a mailboy at Fox, they made MASH. That's where I met Don Sutherland. They made, they were finishing Hello Dolly. They made Beneath the Planet of the Apes. They were very busy. And Irwin Allen was a schlock producer who had all these TV shows, Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Time Tunnel, Land of the Giant. They were all shooting, so there were always lobster men, monsters walking around. It was wonderful. But then Bundy was hired on this movie you're talking about, an MGM movie called, it was released as Kelly's Heroes. What was it called here? What does that mean? Commando Gold. Gold. Steal the gold. Anyway, it's a very silly movie. And you don't think it's silly? You think it's a documentary? It's funny. It is funny. But it's ridiculous. There's a hippie in World War II. Anyway, there was an actor named... No, the German. I can't think of his name. That guy had no sense of humor. No, I forgot his name. That's terrible.
Does jemand have Internet, IMDb?
IMDb, look up Kelly's Heroes.
Heroes, the German actor. Maybe somebody has.
Nobody has. Nobody. Anyway, it was Clint Eastwood, Don Sutherland, Carol O'Connor, Telly Savalas, the Yugoslav army. It was a huge movie. The strangest thing about that movie, it was directed by Brian Hutton. Had a British crew, Italian wardrobe, German and Austrian special effects. It was insane. And the whole crew, a lot of Serbs and Croats, they all hated each other. But they all liked me. And I was like 18, had very long hair. It was the best time of my life. I had all the pleasure of being and none of the responsibility. And I became indispensable to the movie. I was 9 months behind the Iron Curtain, which really meant something. It's interesting because people don't realize that really, you went from color to black and white. It was like going from 1969 to
Der deutsche Name ist...
Okay, die machen ein Stück weiter, ne?
Weil weiter vorne sind alles bekannte Schauspieler.
Ist da noch irgendwer anderes Deutsches dabei, wenn hinter dem Typen?
Achso, später.
Guck mal weiter.
Anyway, so I worked on that movie.
Ich glaube aber auch der Spiegel, der
that was a great experience. And when that movie was done, a guy named Jim O'Rourke and I drove his Volkswagen from Belgrade to Madrid and then went straight to Almeria. And I lived in Almeria over a year, almost 2 years, and worked on many movies there.
For example, with Michael Winner.
Oh, for Michael, I worked on Shadow's Land and
Shadow's Land.
I don't know. And I know Shadow's Land. He was an outrageous character, Michael Winner.
Did you meet there Robert Painter?
That's where I met Bob Painter. Bob Painter, Michael Winner was an English director, made a lot of movies, and he was very outrageous.
He made 3 Death Wishes, but none was granted.
None was what?
Granted. He made 3 Death Wishes, but none was granted.
Wanted.
Granted.
Oh, I see. They made a lot of money. They were so silly. Anyway, Michael made many movies, and he was a very outrageous character. He was, the British crew hated him, the Spanish guys hated him, because he was very abusive, verbally abusive. He would call everyone bad words. He had a big cigar. And what he did that I liked, he would go, "I like it," he would say, which I liked. And I found him very funny. And I worked with Jose Ochoa and Alf Joint, all these stunt guys, and I really enjoyed him, actually.
You have a good dinner with him at Wolfgang Puck in LA.
I did, yes. Yeah. How do you know that? Yeah. How do you know that?
Well, I was there.
You were there?
What's the take on the right?
That's very scary. That's amazing.
Schon Video aufgeladen? Ja, nee.
I guess.
Kannst mal, also bis die Rede zu Ende ist.
I don't know what to say. No, but Michael was, he's in Birkenhair. He's in the coach.
Du machst mal
Robert Peter did a cameo on Birkenhair.
Robert's in which?
Together with
Ray Harryhausen. But Bob Painter was in Birkenhair. If you see Thriller, Bob Painter, the DP, shot Thriller, sitting in the audience in the theater. Bob Painter was in Coming to America. Bob Painter was in Spies Like Us. Bob's in like most of the movies he shot for me. I don't think he's in Trading Places. But he was a British DP, wonderful man, and very talented, and very, I loved him. He did, I think we did 8 or 9 movies together. But anyway, one last question.
Is there a project you would like
from them? No, not from someone who hasn't asked me a question.
A very important question.
No.
Okay, then let's speak along.
Mr. Landis, so I think you're a friend with many famous directors of our time, Steven Spielberg or John Landis. But I also think that you're, besides your artistic feeling, you're, I think, a very good businessman. So can you tell
very wrong?
But can you tell me a little bit about the major differences between such directors as Steven Spielberg or Joe Dante? Steven Spielberg and George Lucas changed the, I don't think willingly but unwillingly changed the system of the American cinema in the 70s.
Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are very good businessmen. Joe Dante and John Landis are not.
And do you think that they made a little bit of destruction in the business, unwillingly, Steven Spielberg, because the drive?
No, I don't think he just. I don't think you can blame somebody.
No, I don't want to blame him.
No, I don't know. I think that Jaws and what Jaws did and Star Wars did is they made B pictures with A budgets, and they were such big hits. I mean, I made a movie, what's it called? Animal House, National Lampoon's Animal House, that cost $2 million and made $300 million. So it actually made more than their movie, but their movie was huge international hit. I don't think Animal House was successful in Germany. I don't think so, and I don't think in France, it was too American. But I don't know what to say about that because they, Steve and George, you ever see what's it called? THX 1138?
Yes.
It's a great film. I'm sad that he's added shit to it, but the original film.
But I think that
American Graffiti.
Yes, but I think he hasn't done very enough films as a good director. I don't think it may be a little.
He made THX 1138 and he made American Graffiti.
Yes.
2 great films. How many people make 2 great films? I'm serious. Me. I'm serious. You're mad at him because...
No, I'm not mad at him, but I think after Star Wars...
Why are you blaming him for something? I mean, George is a businessman, and he's got, he made, as he said to my wife the other day, I have all the money. Peter Jackson is a wonderful filmmaker and a very good businessman. Some people are very Cecil B. DeMille. I mean, there were a lot of businessmen, businesswomen who made films, but I wish I was a good businessman. I'm not. I'm very lucky that I have profit shares in most of my movies, and half of my movies are still generating income. Thank you. But no, Steven is a great businessman, and so is George. Joe and I are not.
Vielen Dank. für eure vielen Fragen und nice to meet you and
Go see, come and see Deborah tomorrow.
Thank you
very much.
Falls Fans dabei sind, die mit dem Englischen nicht zurechtkommen, könnt ihr gerne auf unsere Seite zu bestimmten Themen, die er vielleicht angesprochen hat, die ihr vielleicht teilweise verstanden habt, gerne was fragen, dann übersetze ich die wichtigsten Antworten von dem Filmemacher. Und vergesst nicht, besucht uns auf unserer Filmmakers Cast Facebook-Seite, also facebook.com/filmmakerscast in einem Wort und schreibt uns mal eure Lieblingsfilme, eure Lieblingsregisseure und alle Themen, die euch so beschäftigen.